The ANC just had their NGC meeting, and I would have made this video earlier, but I was stuck listening to Cyril Ramaphosa.
Every ANC member bears a personal responsibility.
And yes, what you just saw was literally how I felt throughout all of it. It was too many hours, way too many words, and he speaks so incredibly slowly. Now, much of this talk was the ANC in some way, with a lot of caveats, taking responsibility for the election losses that they've achieved in 2024.
For the lack of the implementation of our decisions is a disease.
Taking responsibility for the state of the country. And when I say a lot of caveats, I really do mean a lot of caveats. Before I even get into that, let me quickly show this clip to you. This is Cyril Ramaphosa speaking on inflation.
In the last 3 years, inflation has been tapering down from 7.2% to 3.6%, providing relief to households and boosting demand in the economy.
Now, there might be some of you that is quite confused by all of this, so allow me to quickly explain to you, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the other ANC-educated voters. That's not how inflation works. When inflation was 7% and then it comes down to 3.6%, that does not mean that prices are now 4% cheaper. It means that prices are now 7% more expensive. They're just this year going to be 3.6% more expensive. Inflation is merely the rate at which prices are going up. It does not reflect how prices are also coming down. For that, it needs to be deflationary. And the deflation rate of South Africa is 0. There are no deflationary powers or forces working its way into the pricing systems of South Africa. The way you offset this from an economical standpoint would be to have economic growth that equals that of your inflation, because then you will have goods and services becoming cheaper overall, and that would offset the inflation. In other words, the weakening of your currency. Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, not understanding this basic fact, sort of speaks volumes to the rest of his talk. The caveats that I mentioned, yeah, that's Cyril Ramaphosa saying that, yes, we as the ANC should take ownership of the fact that the country isn't growing, that most of our people are still living under the lines of poverty, and that most of our people still rely on the government for cash handouts. The problem, of course, is not the policies themselves. No. According to Cyril Ramaphosa, the problem is the implementation of the policies, insofar as the ANC has not implemented those policies hard enough, and that they should do more. At no point in time does it occur to our illustrious president that perhaps, just perhaps, the policies themselves are slightly problematic. No, in fact, Cyril Ramaphosa goes on to say that in a time like now, where progressive politics is under attack in the world, and you have right-wing groups aligning themselves with, in his own words, and I quote, others around the world, of course he's talking about Donald Trump, it is more important than ever that the ANC is united with all of its communist partners to push through progressive politics. In fact, he praises the GNU, I do not kid, that the GNU is not stood in the way of the ANC in implementing their progressive politics, and that through the GNU, the ANC was able to get the progressive policies that they've always wanted into the public conversation.
Through the GNU, the ANC has continued to execute its agenda for nation building and fundamental social and economic transformation, albeit under difficult conditions. We have stood firm against resistance campaigns mounted by right-wing forces and have not retreated from progressive domestic and foreign policy positions.
Sadly, because the media will never fact-check our illustrious president, Cyril Ramaphosa, or the ANC, or their progressive policies, it falls to me. Mr. Ramaphosa blames AfriForum and right-wing groups, as well as the attack on progressive policies around the world, internationally, and so on. Also, the ANC's failure to implement all of their strategies in order to make sure that the Freedom Charter and the National Democratic Revolution documents are implemented and succeed in this country. He also blames the legacy of apartheid. Of course, why wouldn't he do that? That's literally their go-to mantra. So I thought, let's do a bit of collection here. Let's look at some of the stats, because stats do not lie. If you pay attention from 1994, you will find that in 1994, the unemployment is 22.94%. And over that course, you see a couple of hiccups here and there as, the country goes through uncertainties, especially after Nelson Mandela steps down. But under Nelson Mandela, we start to see that number go down. It is slow, but remember, the country is for the first time ever opening up its economy. There's a lot that still needs to be learned. It's gonna be slow in the beginning. That's the whole point of economics. It's sort of a compounding effect. The more you do it, the faster it starts to go, but it will always start slow. And then Nelson Mandela, obviously replaced by Thabo Mbeki. You can imagine this was a bit of an uncertain period of time for the world. They didn't know quite how this was going to work. But then as Thabo Mbeki takes over at 22.79% unemployment, you can see unemployment steadily going down year on year until 2007 when Jacob Zuma takes over. There's another thing that happens around 2010 that really starts to speed things up. Because here we suddenly start to see unemployment rise rapidly. And then in 2013 and 2014, this will be known. For those of you who don't know, you should know that in 2013, 2014, the ANC turned BEE from being an optional sort of carrot-based program where you would get treats and rewards if you helped out minority groups or, underprivileged groups in the country. This was the year, or these were the years, where BEE was turned into a punishment system, where if you did not adhere to BEE, you would be punished. You would not be able to do business with the state. You would not be able to do business with any businesses that do business with the state. So, it became a lot harder. From here, we start to see a rapid increase. And as is usually the case with all economics, any implementation of any sort of law takes between 18 and 24 months to first start showing its head. And you will see that in 2016, unemployment skyrockets to 26%. From here, it will continue to climb. And now in 2024, it is at 33.17%. In 2025, the latest figures that we have, it's not on this table, but the latest figures we have suggest that it is about 34% unemployment. So it's going up still, although they're finagling the numbers a little. Next up, we can look at the GDP of our illustrious nation. And here we find in 1994, the GDP of South Africa is $153 billion, $153 billion. That's the GDP of South Africa. From 1994 all the way until 2011, we reach 458 billion US dollars in GDP. So something happened from 1994 to about 2011. Remember, I told you 18 to 24 months after a change for things to start happening. Jacob Zuma comes to power in 2008. And you see a final bit of climb. That's still Thabo Mbeki. And then what we see is a complete collapse in the GDP of South Africa. It is no longer growing. Instead, it is completely stagnating. But remember what Cyril Ramaphosa said. This is the result of apartheid, the legacy of apartheid. Yet we see that if things remained the same from 1994 until it was in 2008, we would have had an incredible economy by now. Instead, the economy is always trending downward. Finally, we look at GDP annual growth, and here you will find that pretty much the period of decent growth. Now, it should be mentioned, in countries where you have a lot of sort of communist policies, you're always going to have a lot of uncertainty. That is why even during the apartheid era, because the apartheid era also had a lot of socialist policies, there were a lot of things that the government was intimately involved in over time. So you see these giant growth spurts and then downturns and then growth spurts, because that's just the nature of how government works, right? And then in 1994, you start to see the ANC take over. And you see a reasonable period, actually, where we're almost never in minus growth, right? Very rarely do we dip into minus growth. The first time is in 2009, which is the global crisis, but that's 1.5%. And then we start to see a giant downturn where economic growth is now sitting at about 0.6%. But remember, this is the legacy of apartheid. Again, even here, we see from 1994, we see a reasonable amount of growth. The economy is constantly growing, constantly going better, constantly going up. And then something happens in 2008. And from that moment, everything starts to trend down. Was it that the legacy of apartheid was asleep at the wheel? It didn't quite know what it wanted to be when it grows up. And then finally in 2009, it matures and goes, right, I am now ready to destroy the economy of the ANC. No, it was because Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa followed 2008. And from there, we just see ever more the pushing of communist policies by the ANC. The real danger, however, Cyril Ramaphosa did not skip a beat to blame AfriForum and right-wing Afrikaners for hoodwinking the ANC. And then something that slipped under the radar in absolute terms was this new bill on the 11th of November from Jama-ah, or however the hell you want to pronounce the Muslim party that barely matters, but still happens to have incredible connections within government. Strange, I know. They come up with this new bill, a bill that seeks to criminalize apartheid. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but hold on, we don't have apartheid anymore. Like, how in the hell can you criminalize a system that no longer exists? That's exactly the thought. The more I look into this bill, the more I'm not entirely sure what the hell is going on. You see, the bill is incredibly vague on what it considers to be apartheid. And I'll just read you one of the final lines here that says, "The world must not allow apartheid to rear its ugly head again. This bill is a bold step to ensure those who engage in apartheid activities," unspecified, "including PR stunts." That would mean YouTube videos. That would mean AfriForum going to America. Basically, anything that they deem to be an apartheid stunt, whether it be PR or be just an act that you commit, would now be criminalized. And you would be able to go to jail. You'd be able to be classed as a traitor or a terrorist to your nation. And you would be jailed as a result of that. This bill, by the way, is supported by every single far left party in the country. You have the African National Congress, Economic Freedom Fighters, Good Party, National Colored Congress, Pan-African Congress, Rise Mzansi, Mkhonto Wesizwe Party, and Jama-ah. They're all party to this bill. So this bill is almost certainly going to pass. The problem with this bill, or the main purpose of this bill, that will be the complete eradication of free speech in this country. No more will any of us be able to say anything about what the ANC is actually doing because of how broadly defined apartheid is in the bill. They don't actually give any specifics on what might be classed as such. And if you listen to Cyril Ramaphosa's speech, it is effectively anyone who does not agree with the ANC's progressive policies. So if you do not agree with the redress race laws of South Africa, if you call them race laws, if you call the ANC a communist government that is oppressing white people, if you try to stand up for white people's rights, if you build white universities or Afrikaans universities, build white schools or white universities, if you are Urania, basically anyone or anything that tries to do something for the people that are white in this country can be prosecuted under this new bill because they can literally just class it as the crime of apartheid. That is where we are right now, ladies and gentlemen. And trust me when I tell you, the ANC will pass this bill because for the ANC, it's not important whether or not South Africa actually does well. They don't care whether or not their people are actually uplifted. What the ANC wants is complete and total control. And what really hoodwinks them is the ability for South Africans to speak. The fact that Trump has now turned South Africa into an enemy state of America. The fact that Trump isn't giving free money to the ANC anymore, that hurts them. And that really angers them. And we are in trouble. We are seriously in trouble. If this bill passes, you're going to see the complete and utter eradication of groups like AfriForum, groups like Solidarity, people like myself, the YouTubers, the content creator space. We will all disappear. You will effectively have the mainstream media that controls the narrative on behalf of the government. And if you say anything that the government doesn't like, you will be jailed as a result of it. I don't know how we stop this. Short of Trump literally declaring the ANC a terrorist organization and invading this country, I don't see how you stop this, because they have the votes. Between the ANC Mkhonto Sizwe and the Economic Freedom Front, or Freedom Fighters, they can push through the vote. They have more than 60% of the support in the parliament. They don't need the DA. The DA doesn't have to oppose this bill. Even if they do, there isn't enough votes left on the table to oppose this bill successfully. And what's more, and what really makes this bill dangerous, is that this bill is worded that it will precede any and all other laws, including any constitutional rights. In other words, this bill can trump your freedom of speech, which is a right that is enshrined in our Constitution. It can trump that because this bill will be given the power that it precedes everything. If the government perceives that you are committing the crime of apartheid, it doesn't matter that you have freedom of speech, because you have committed the crime of apartheid. That does not apply to freedom of speech. It also means, and this is really sad, it means that they can literally just remove the ability for due process. Because the way this bill is worded, the bill will precede any and all other laws, which due process is a law. You should be in front of a judge. You should be able to make your case. You should be able to argue your case. But if this bill precedes all other laws, then you can literally be jailed indefinitely for the crime of apartheid. And there is no way for you to say, but I need a court case because, well, this bill precedes all other laws and you have committed the crime of apartheid, as vague as that could be. This is beyond dangerous. And that is where we're headed with the ANC. I don't yet know what the answer is. I don't know how we fix this. I just know that it is dangerous. Anyways, that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of all of this. I'd love to read your thoughts, and how exactly would we go about combating this? That, I think, is probably the most important question. Massive shout out and thank you to every single one of you that watch. If you want more people to see the content that I make, please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing this video around with as many people as possible. Huge thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel and allowing me to do what I do, and hopefully do more in the future, especially if we start having the ANC cracking down on free speech. I am going to need your help. If you want to become a patron, hit the link in the description down below or the join button right below this video. As always, I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.